meeting tonight. And before we get started with the agenda, this will be a bit of a different approach tonight. I'm very excited about it. So bear with me. First, I would like to say a few words. There's a lot of people here that might feel a little bit raw tonight due to the election and the protests and everything that's been happening recently. And I'm hoping that we can have this opportunity to express ourselves and reunite without anybody feeling left out or taking over the meeting. I want this to be a safe place for open discussion as a community. So with that, let's have a good night. And I will start with the first part of the agenda. There are two different presentations, but both of those presentations have been postponed for a month. There's one ACLU attorney who I'm working with on developing a workshop or a presentation for people with disabilities to educate them on their rights, if they're arrested, what they can do for fingerprinting, those kinds of things. So that's in process right now, and they will be coming to the next meeting to present on that. And the other presenter was the ALF. It's www.alf.org, and it's a company where they are working with different groups and organizations, talking about trust building, communication, and relations. And that's the goal of that organization. So I would be interested in having them come and share their work. So I've asked them to participate and join the meeting. I think that would be a great tool, and that will be happening next month as well. I'm really looking forward to it. Tonight will be a bit more of a casual gathering. And I will now pass it off to V to explain why we are in the setup that we're in and what surprises that holds.
Testing. Do I have to turn is this on? Can you guys hear me now? Okay, thanks. So, the main reason why we thought it would be nice to be in a circle and to take away the desks and to present ourselves more clearly to one another is in an effort to share with everybody how we all belong in community together. Although each one of us has our own power networks and our own social networks and the sorts of different influences that we have, they are nonetheless powerful in their own right. And by being in circle, we get to come to the circle full face, without any desks and without any obstructions, to share with each other our experiences and to give each other hopefully our most honest interpretations about what's happening with whatever work we're doing. I'm going to be sort of the meta facilitator because this is something that I'm quote unquote, what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. Qualified, that's it. Qualified to do. But clearly there are other people in the community who have been so incredibly supportive and helpful. Jan Friedman and Casper, Calais, and Ted have been very supportive, and Ann Brayfield too. Tonight, Calais has offered her expertise in working with circles, and she will be our circle guardian, and I hope that you can provide that too, knowing your work in the Truth and Reconciliation some years ago. That would be nice. We ask that people do your best to stay in the chairs and stay involved, and when somebody else is speaking, to listen and try not to do crosstalk. And if some standard of conduct comes up that's troublesome, we ask that you address the chair, Philip, and we'll go from there. And then Calais, I'm going to leave you with lots of lee room, and Anne, you as well. So, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, V. So in the agenda packet that we have here, it includes a statement from the judge, Judge Simon, and the report from the meeting 2 weeks ago on Monday. I don't know if you have all had the opportunity to read that, but I would like to give everyone the opportunity to express any concerns or questions, what may have you before we move on. So that would be on page, there's 4 different sections here. So the first one is evidence, and that's, there's the memo, there's A and B, the memo, and the report. And if there's any comments in regards to that, I'd like to open that up now. Yeah, I realize there's no actual page numbers on it, so that's a little bit confusing. It's the 3rd page. And that's the memo from the attorney,
Oh, is that the one from?
summarizing what happened during the judge's meeting. Yes. Yes, that's correct. It's the abridged memo. And the next page after Tracy's memo is Exhibit A. And Copwatch, the article from Copwatch. After that, so following that is the Mayor Charlie Hale's response about the judge's report.
You know what? I forgot something.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just remembered that we're supposed to start the circle by introducing everybody. But that's me.
Oh.
I got nervous. I'm human.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so we can hold on this discussion and go around the circle and introduce everyone by name. Go ahead, V.
So I'll go first if you guys don't mind, and then I'll tap to my left. My name is Mila Vianney Pettis-Rapier. I'm one of the voting members on the Community Oversight Advisory Board, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
My name is Catherine Smith. I'm just very interested in what people are doing and the city is doing, COAB and COCOL are doing regarding these issues, and I'm just a member of the community.
Thank you for coming tonight.
I'm Mike Schuman. I'm with Portland Copwatch, and I'm a retired attorney.
No, you're supposed to pass on.
Oh,
Broken the line. I'm Dan Handelman. I'm also with Portland Copwatch. And just a quick comment on this. I think regardless of the format you're using, it's helpful for us if the COAB reads their mission statement at the beginning of the meeting so we remember why we're here. So,
Thank you, Dan.
I'm
And
Nancy
I am
Newell.
Philip Wolf. I'm a voting
Oops, I'm sorry.
member, and I'm the executive committee chair, and I'm also a member of the accountability subcommittee. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Nancy Newell, longtime resident of Portland, very active in many things. Really hoping we keep strong in spite of all the blockage that we've faced, and we're going to get excellent results from this. The quality is tremendous.
Tom Steenson, a member of the COAB, chair of the, well, I think I'll be the chair of the Accountability Subcommittee.
I'm Darrell Walker, the CEO for Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare. I'm not a voting member of COAB. I'm a concerned citizen.
I'm Ted Lubin. I'm from Southwest Portland, and I'm a citizen.
Kalei Lubin, aloha everybody. I'm from Southwest Portland. I live with this guy over here.
I'm Mary Claire Buckley, and I work at the Portland Police Bureau.
I'm Ann Casper. I just come here to see all my friends. So if I know you, raise your hand. I worked with you. Okay. Hey, you too, Sensei. We try to work with the police. I don't know, you guys, let us work with the police, please. Tasha Hager, Portland Police, and also a COAB member.
A Katie Hull, community member, and just very involved and interested and concerned and hoping that things actually move in certain directions and things get done.
I'm Jan Friedman. I'm with Disability Rights Oregon, and I'm also on the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee.
I'm Mary Eng, who read Katie Hull's brilliant letter today. And my favorite line was that some of us felt like we were thrown into the lion's den when we were asked to just, come to COAB. And I'm a Leo, and I like the lion idea. But it did feel a bit lion's den, and we can be nice cats, meow.
Debbie Iona, League of Women Voters. Is this the boundary here? So that's 5 people. Keep going? Okay.
My name is Rochelle Silver. I'm a COAB member. Along with Catherine Gardner, we are the temporary co-chairs of the Mental Health Crisis Response Subcommittee, and I just want to let everybody know, if you haven't looked at the website, we will be meeting on Monday, November 28th, 7 to 8:30 at the COAB office, and we will be having a presentation from the Behavioral Health Unit, and invite all of you to be there. So just
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, but please, just for visual needs, raise your hand so I know who's speaking. I can point to you, and then you can make a comment.
Can I point? All right. I just want to go back to the first announcement. You talked about people with mental health issues or disabilities, I think you said, possibly getting arrested. So the National Alliance of Mental Illness actually has something that we teach for people with mental health issues, what you should do, some points of what you can do if you go into jail, end up in jail. So I would recommend that you reach out to the National Alliance of Mental Illness office, Multnomah County. The material is called the peer-to-peer class, and we can work on that too, to add that.
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. And maybe the ACLU and the National Alliance can work together to come up with one brilliant program. Thank you.
What'd you say? Oh, I can't arrange that. Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, no, you're right. Yes. Okay. So moving on, is there anybody else who would like to make a comment about the packet tonight? Yes, please.
Hi, this is Mary Eng. I will try to be brief, and feel free to cut me off if I'm too long-winded. There's some very, very, very difficult issues in the material that's been recently released, and I just want to take the plunge. I was reading Crunching on Haiti's History, and it is my understanding, felt like, just viscerally, I don't know what that word means, but I felt like I was kicked in the stomach when I perceived the offending term go back to Haiti, because I was more worried about the cholera epidemic. So I'm trying to say to Keith, hey, you're going to do humanitarian work on the cholera epidemic, and you're going to go back to Haiti. And I think we're having troubles with sense of humor, with sense of direction, with sense of honor and integrity. But it is my understanding, and I'm not a CIA apologist, but I'm coming from a 2-generational CIA family, that there was some narco-trafficking CIA, dictatorships, coups d'etats, mass murders, tortures. And I am not a translator, and I do not speak for Mr. Davis, but it is my understanding that in his very, very poor choice of words, his intent was to say, if you facilitated a dictator or torture or mass murder or exclusion of a demagogue, which it seems that maybe Aristide was some kind of demagogue to some people with his interest in liberation theology, like a populist like Cesar Chavez, I'm taking it. But it was very offensive to the people who were being oppressed and slaughtered. And I feel like my interactions with Miss Judy Prosper have always been positive. Like, my favorite moment with her was I sweep to the floor and do the splits in front of like the city attorneys, and I'm being goofy, like, yay, we're all going to work through this together. And the comment that Ms. Reeves says in the complaint is that the court did not offer admonishment. But I want you to know I did. And I think we as friends need to call each other out when something has been too far. And I think that's what friends can do, is they can say, 5 whiskeys is too many, or you're too drunk to drive, or no, that's incorrect, or sit down. And you know the theatrical motif where you have that hook, you just pull someone off the stage. I held the door and I said, thank you, sir. I have never once called Mr. Davis sir. And I went straight up to that podium and I apologized to Miss Prosper. And the word that came to my mouth was disgraceful. And we all can walk in grace, we can find the grace, we can channel the right words that we need to say what we really mean and not our pain. And what I see is the underside of this story is that we have relentless, malicious prosecutions and cyberbullying, arrests, brutality, torture, pain compliance, wrist bending, psychological trauma, unfair, cruel accusations of upskirting a woman's skirt, which could damage a man's reputation for his lifetime, when there was no possibility of the angle having an upskirt from a camera that is held over the head of the future police chief, Mr. Marshman. And I'm not saying I agree with a New Jersey accent versus a California accent. We have different communication styles. And at the moment, I could say as a woman, if I had been there, I would have been like, hey, Keith, man, back off. Like, just give her some space. And I wouldn't probably have made such a big deal of this issue. But I think when he is then criticized in the memorandum as making comments about upskirting, this upskirt allegation, yes.
Keith is in the room now, he can speak for himself. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Shall I just wrap it up?
I think so.
All right.
Thank you. We're started. We're moving on. Yeah, comment.
Yeah, I got 2 comments. The first one is that I'm not clear that the city attorney intended the same.
Is that mic on?
Court.
I can't, yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
It's got to get turned on.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Everything is open.
How do you turn it on?
Hello, hello?
Sorry about that. Okay, first of all, I'm not sure the city attorney attended the same hearing that I did.
She wasn't there.
Or whoever wrote that letter, because I attended a hearing that I thought was fairly remarkable in that the judge actually listened to everybody that had something to say that day. And it's like everything else you see in the media. There's 500 good things happening, and there's one little tiny thing happening, and that's when everything blows up, and the bad thing is what you see. And that's the first thing I got to. Second thing I got to say is that I've had great faith in the COAB through the whole time that we could actually get some police reform going. And when people come in and they are rude and they get in people's faces and they shove cameras in their faces, that's not okay. They're going to wreck the COAB. The mayor and the city officials have been using that in order to take this organization out. And they're almost managed to do it. And so if anybody has any interest in having the COAB successful, stop doing that stuff.
Thank you.
Well, One thing I found interesting is Tracy Reeve wasn't even at the hearing, so I don't know how she would know anything that happened, because as we all know, cameras are not allowed in federal courtrooms, so anything she wrote in that was hearsay, because she wasn't there.
She was there.
Oh, she was?
She was.
Oh, she just didn't present?
She was there.
Well, okay. Well, that is one thing. I guess she just didn't introduce herself. But I also didn't understand why they were attacking Joe Walsh in an article, because they were like, well, he went before Judge Simon and like won. And so I'm like, you know, like a lawyer who goes before a judge and wins a case, they can never come back again and talk. I'm like, I don't think so. Yeah, I think, you know, I think a lot of what has happened has been frustration because there's been no vehicle to deal with things. And I think the large reason this isn't working is there's no single point of contact for the city to like take responsibility for all things COAB and COCL.
Thank you. Nancy.
I've been in federal court in various activities at least 3 times. I was in shock that in the recess, when we were allowed to be in various parts of the courtroom, that an incident happened from people that I'd never been familiar with their role. They called themselves U.S. Marshals. They entered the courtroom with no identity, in plain clothes, and I noticed their body energy, and I went over to them and I said, you look like you are looking at the person who is trying to sign up under the judge's instruction, and that is what is happening. Do you have some intention? And they charged right into the courtroom, and they took him down. And so I'm just asking, as COAB member, and when this is a proceeding that there's supposed to be some sense of justice, that this even happened, and can we find out what the role truly is of a U.S. Marshal? Thank you.
Yes.
So at the COAB, we've talked about trauma-informed care practices, and seeing something like that really traumatized me. Now, I've missed other things going on in COAB. I happen to not be there. But I think it's important that, because a lot of us gotten to know each other, that that's part of it, that we learn to work with this trauma together and have that as part of our meetings. Like, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was, I walked away from that and there was no closure for me for that. So that's a great thing. And think about, how do we work with trauma?
I have something to say. I was at the hearing, and first of all, I'm very impressed with Judge Simon. He made sure that everyone was heard, and he stayed after. We were supposed to end at 5, and I believe it went on until 6:30. It seemed that he really wanted to hear what everyone had to say, and it doesn't necessarily means that a person is going to get up there and say everything's bright and rosy. People are going to be frustrated. They are going, and that's going to come out. But the point is that Judge Simon wanted to take the pulse of the situation and understand people so that he could make a fair and just decision. And that's what really impressed me. One thing, if a person says something that is not appropriate, you should call them out on the spot right there. If it wasn't okay, then the judge should have called them out and moved on. So nothing was called out during this time, and now after the fact, we're seeing this complaint. Yeah. That's a good point. So that's curious to me. And I read this complaint again and again, and I think this type of bringing this type of attention to this specific incident, of course, this incident can be resolved. You know, we can discuss about what was appropriate or what was not appropriate, but the formality of this complaint, it seems a distraction from the point. And the city and the community has very different perspectives about how we express frustration. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
I was
Katie?
just going to ask one quick thing. Yeah, if this
A microphone?
Was,
Microphone?
Sorry. I guess I'm just curious, if this was such an issue, why did not the city attorneys not make any objections during the hearing? I found that interesting.
And just, I would like to reiterate, I did object.
Okay.
Well, maybe I should say something.
We okay. I like running around in circles. I trespassed.
Okay, you're good.
So maybe, so maybe, doesn't sound like it's working. Hello, okay, there we go. So maybe a lot of people need to realize that we haven't had the same experiences with the police that other people have. And I am mentally ill. I have PTSD, and I have PTSD from being tortured by the police, okay? That I sustain injuries that I get an SSI check for. I don't only get I don't get my SSI just for injuries, but that is part of it, is physical disabilities from beatings and torture sessions by the cops, okay? So maybe I'm not the most cop-friendly person in the world, and I have a lot of issues with the police, especially when I was supposed to have a meeting tonight at the CRC about them using pain compliance techniques on a mentally ill person that wasn't resisting, but it's still within police policy to use pain compliance whether someone's resisting or not. So maybe the police need to tune up their little sadist manual and get their act together and stop blaming the community. I'm getting really sick of the victims being gaslighted and turned into whatever, your little toys, the police department and Cocal, and then made out to be like we're this disruptive element when the only thing we're trying to do is voice our grievances and tell how it really is on the streets, not how everyone wants to hear it. I don't know how many people in this room have had their mom raped by a cop or a prison guard, but I have, okay? Have any of you had your parents' store burned down by the police and the mayor's son? Well, I have, okay? And that's because the police and the mayor's son were listening to their little cop buddy, their cop parents and their mayor parents talking about how they hated my hippie parents, so they went and burned down their store and bankrupted them. And then my parents lost their farm over less than an ounce of weed. Google Pamela Snow White Davis, the marijuana mama, and KIF Davis, and you can find about 100 articles on me and all the atrocities that just took place in the 90s. And as someone who's been homeless for over 10 years, and 6.5 of them right here in Portland, I've had a whole different experience than most people in this room have ever had with the police. So maybe people need to realize that, people act like they're advocates for the mentally ill and they want police reform, but they really don't want to really want to listen to people that are the actual victims, or unless they put them in these nice shiny boxes and say the way they want it to be told, Yeah. So, so in reality, I didn't disrupt the COAB process or the COCL process. I brought things to a head and I got rid of a bunch of people that needed to go anyways. And I will continually go for the throat, not the, I'm not gonna sugarcoat things. I am the go for the throat person, okay? I'm the guy with teeth that bites in, that cuts through the bullshit, that's not gonna just sit around and take it and be nice about it, it's not my style. I'm not gonna passively resist and not do anything and just be all beaten on and sugarcoat everything for the police state and a regime that makes the Nazis look like good guys. Sorry, the American regime is like, you wanna go on the scale of evil? We're skyrocketing way past the Nazis. And most of the ideas that the Nazis ever got, they got from Americans like Henry Ford, Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist who started Planned Parenthood. You can look up how she called all humans human weeds, basically. Okay, so basically, You know, I don't buy into the whole style, and I don't buy into the system, and I see through the bullshit, and I'm not gonna just sweep it under the rug to make politicians and delusional city attorneys and cops feel like they can just bully people and get away with it. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. I will not sugarcoat, and I will continually go for the throat, and I plan on launching multi-million-dollar lawsuits against all kinds of people, including Cokel, including the city attorneys. I plan on filing bar complaints on all these people. And, you know, that's how it's going down. I'm not gonna back down. And maybe they need to just put a bullet in me now, because I'm not gonna stop, okay? Because that's how it is, you know?
Yeah. Keith, is it okay if I address Keith? That's okay? Keith is your name, right? You and Bob? Bob's an old friend of mine. I just want to say I heard you, and I thank you very much for speaking for us. And if we can work together, and I know you have one way of doing things, and I certainly have another way of working as an advocate. And I just want to say I appreciate what you're saying, and I hear you, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that, Keith, we wouldn't be a community without you, Keith. Okay? And I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you're here.
I'm probably gonna go film the protest and go just film the cops being bad, and they haven't been around very often for these last couple days, but I'm sure they're gonna show up soon and get some action.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I want to follow on the coattails of Anne in speaking that we appreciate you sharing here, Keith. And if we can operate as one body, I believe in strategy and not operating as rogue agents as much as possible, you know, getting really collaborative and strategic about things, because you're right, sometimes the best approach is direct. Sometimes the best approach is kind of through the side door. Sometimes the best approach is diplomatic to accomplish our goals. And I really believe in working together. Peace. I take peace working very, you know, real. Keep it real. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Yeah.
There's another part of the report that I think. Oh. Another part of the report that I think needs to be paid attention to, and it's in the long report from the city attorneys, and it's on page 3 under procedural and legal framework. And the paragraph starts with in 2010, Aaron Campbell was shot and killed. Can you find all that? The sentence that I want to bring to your attention.
Wait a minute, where, I'm sorry.
Page 3.
It's the one that was filed by the city on November 3rd. You can see a date stamp.
It's page 3 of 9.
You basically have the top city attorneys gaslighting the mentally ill.
Keith, it's my turn. In the center of that paragraph, there's a statement that says that the city invited the DOJ to look at what the police were doing, and the DOJ did an investigation and asserted, using their word, that the Portland Police Bureau had a policy or practice of unconstitutionally using excessive force on people who either were or perceived to be mentally ill. The next sentence is a sentence I'd like to have you pay attention to. It says, the city of Portland denied and continues to deny that any such policy or practice existed. The reason that that's so important is
Will you point me out where that is? I'm
if you don't own a problem, you can't fix a problem. And as long as the city of Portland denies that there is a problem here, all we're doing is, I don't know what, putting flowers on the wall or something like that. So the COCL and the COAB can do all this work, and but if the city doesn't think there's a problem, what is it that we're fixing? Thank you.
Yeah, I want to respond to you, Rochelle. Thank you for pointing that out. I noticed that same sentence in there. It's very interesting. The phrasing says that we deny and will continue to deny. And then the very next sentence it says, but we are working on improving. So it's almost as if they're admitting there is a problem, but they refuse to accept that there's a problem in the first place. It's really not clear. And so where's the emphasis on accountability? For them to say that we deny and continue to deny, the community sees that. And trust is broken by that. So that's one thing that is very concerning to me when I read it. And the city has not been within compliance for quite a while. They have failed to fill 6 seats on the COAB for 6 months. We have struggled to function as a result as the COAB. Where is the city in this? So, and that's a long list, and I could go on and on, but that's one thing I just want to keep emphasizing and emphasizing in the report.
Yes.
And I would say, too, that it's unfortunate that we have this sort of narrative coming out of the city. Tonight I want to give props to Lieutenant Tasha Hager and to Mary Claire Buckley for coming and attending. And this puts Portland Police Bureau members who take their job seriously, who come and spend their time, their evenings, it just puts them in the worst position. And I wish, as naive as it may sound, I wish there was more caring about people, because I'm sure all of us would rather be doing some of the great hobbies that we enjoy, and instead of, coming in and dealing with community problems. But I'm saddened that the city doesn't have more care and concern and respect for our public servants. So I just want to put that out there. I really want to see that change. So.
Thank you, V. What's going on?
Just raise your hand.
Is every...
Okay. Dan, did you want to?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just noticed you had written several things. I wasn't sure if you maybe wanted to comment on the notes you've been making.
So I am Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and we did submit this 9-page analysis of the COCL's last report to the judge. Last meeting, I asked you, the COAB, if you would review that and submit any comments you had about it to the powers that be, because I know you didn't have time to review that report yourself. I also see that they have their semi-annual assessment outcomes report on the table over there, and I think we're going to spend some time going over that as well. My understanding is that Dr. Rosenbaum's coming to present this to you next month, so I think it would be good if you all are prepared to pepper him with questions. And when we do these analyses, we have as many questions about what the COCL did as about what the city did and what the Bureau is doing. But he does bring out a lot of issues that are important, and I don't want to, we've had our disagreements with Dr. Rosenbaum, I think all of us. But I think that there are some things in here that are useful for us as a community, and I think it's worth reading the reports. The other thing is that the main thing that I spoke about when Judge Simon let us speak to him, which, again, I think he was trying to show up the city for the way they've been stopping people from testifying before city council, and they violently push people out of City Hall. And I have been told by the mayor twice in the last month and a half to stop talking because he didn't appreciate that I was talking on the topic that he didn't like, which is not how you listen to people. Right? And so this should also be a lesson to the city. Tonight's meeting should be a lesson to the city as well as Judge Simon. But my main point that I made there out of our analysis is that there are other committees that are being listened to more than you. And I see you have a draft letter here. I'm hoping that you're going to talk about that you're going to send in asking why the Training Advisory Council got feedback and you didn't. Why? And you have former members of the BHU Advisory Committee here. Maybe they can talk a little bit about how they get their feedback and how come they're having their recommendations adopted and you're not. Because that's very frustrating for you. It's very frustrating for the community, especially those of us who helped you craft your recommendations, that's not happening. And it just seems ridiculous that, no offense, but the BHU Advisory Council doesn't even have open meetings to the public, and you do, and you're not getting listened to. So I'd like to see some discussion around that. Just as a program note, we at CopWatch forwarded out the Training Advisory Council's agenda last Friday and told people that the meeting was going to be yesterday, the 9th, because that's the day they usually meet on the second Wednesday. They changed the date, but they didn't change it on one of the calendars online. So I thought it was last night, and I drove all the way out to the training facility, and there was nobody there, and there was no note on the door. And I luckily called one of my members who had the email and said, oh, you didn't reach the email you sent out. It says it's on the 16th. But those of you who want to see what the chief said back to the Training Advisory Council, I know you have the paperwork in here, but you can see him talk to them. It'll be next Wednesday, the 16th, out there at 149th and whatever that street is on, out by the airport. So I think it's worth going to one of the Training Advisory Council meetings and doing some cross talking between your groups.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Does anybody want to respond to Dan in discussion or concerns? I think it's a great discussion to have. Go ahead, V.
No, I'm sorry.
So just real quick, there are several BHUAC members here, but I figured I'll address that part first. So the BHUAC makes the recommendations directly to me. So I respond to those recommendations. This committee was set up to make its recommendations that go through the COCL to the DOJ and then to the Police Bureau. And then the response back to this committee was designed to come from the DOJ. And that came about in a meeting much, much earlier than this meeting way back. So it's the design. The TAC is designed to give its recommendations to the chief. So that's why the chief responds to those. So that's the design of how the committees are. And I don't know if any BHUAC members want to pipe up or if they see it that way.
Hi, Dan. We've had this discussion before. I am a former member of the BHUAC, which is the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee. So I think it's good to, and just to mention that the Portland Police, before I believe the settlement came into action, started the Behavioral Health Unit. And actually, as people, I'm kind of around different communities, and maybe Daryl, you can speak to this too. I think the Behavioral Health Unit has a really good reputation with people with mental health issues. Not everybody, but in general, very good reputation. People feel that they're listened to and served. Again, not everybody, but I think we have that. And the meeting being closed, that advisory committee, honestly, it's the best committee I've been on in my life, and I have been on a lot of committees, right, Mary Claire? We've been on so at the city, state, and other places, and I know it's not perfect, but starting off, which I'm not there any longer, starting off, it was really, in a way, necessary to do that, so we could have these really tough conversations from different viewpoints and create a safe atmosphere together. So if we had things that were challenging, we had things that we wanted done, they got done. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to do that. I'm really happy now the minutes are online and it's a little bit more open. But it was a new thing for Portland Public Police and the City of Portland, and I think they were just kind of cautious. What is this going to be like? And I think Jan can speak better if you want to about stuff.
So I'm currently on the advisory committee for the behavioral health unit, and I did move to have it be subject to open meetings laws unsuccessfully. It was voted down, and there was an interpretation by the city attorney that precluded it from that, but at least then the minutes and agenda became part of the website. Now, on Disability Rights Oregon's website, we've had, a statement that we're part of this group and we like to hear from people. I mean, I'm happy to hear from people. I think that there should be better transference of information from this group to that group, for sure, especially from my perspective, because I'm there working to represent people with disabilities in our community who, have been affected by concerns with the police. So anyhow, so I'd like to hear more from the community too. But in terms of some specific mechanism for getting this group to have information so that they could provide input if they wanted to, it doesn't seem like that would be rocket science to me. I mean, maybe not everything could be because some things just come up right at the time, but some things we get in advance. So why couldn't this group have them in advance too? And then we can take in that information. I think the group is effective, but I don't think it's effective if it's leaving out the community. I think that it would be a sign of a lack of effectiveness and something that we really should improve.
Yeah, go ahead.
Briefly, I've read the settlement agreement, but not a million times, and I just stumbled on something in one of the COCOL's documents that was doing the side-by-side analysis with a chunk of the actual old settlement agreement matching with the policy and looking at ways, sort of like looking at biblical analysis or something, like look at this version and look at that version and see how closely they match. And I just happened to turn to section 130, and everyone needs to just think about section 130. It is the most protective, beautiful portion of the settlement agreement because it is the prohibition on retaliation, intimidation, coercion, any kind of adverse action that might arise to anyone within or on the outside of the force. So that is both protective of officers who become whistleblowers, and it's protective of us if we begin an IPR complaint. But we do know, as a matter of fact, that many of us who have possibly skeptically engaged in the system have faced very severe, egregious retaliation. So for me, the assessment that there was a partial compliance with the anti-retaliation measure was a stretch. It was more like egregious, systemic, malicious retaliation. And I don't want to think that. I want to think we're good at heart and that we can get over that. But we need to talk about retaliation.
V, did you want to say something?
I did it. I just want to go back to what Jan was talking about a little bit earlier in terms of communications throughput or mechanism between the COAB and the thanks. I'm always like Boo-a Hawk or something, I want to acronize it. Yeah. But maybe the executive committee or the mental health committee or somebody on the COAB could. Do you all have a contact point? I mean, how could we open up lines of communication to be more effective?
So I'm going to call out Beth Epps, who's in the room. So here's how the BHUAC decided to try and interface with you. The BHUAC talked about it. They decided they were not going to open the meeting to the public, but they wanted to make sure that they had a form of communication with you. And Beth Epps was voted as the official member from the BHUAC. She's been attending COAB meetings and also the mental health sub-COAB meetings. and I can let her speak to that a little bit. As far as the things that some of the things that you guys look at or talk about are not the same things that the BHUAC talks about. They're not tasked with the entire agreement. They're tasked with some very specific parts of the agreement. Their input, they have input on some of the same things that the COAB has input on. It's not meant to be an all input. Each committee is made up of different people, and that's on purpose to try and get community involvement in different areas, not to hear from one voice or one group's voice, but multiple voices, if that makes sense. So we're not looking for ideas that are all going to align, because people are different and everybody's going to have different ideas. But we did want to make sure that there was an element of understanding what the different groups were working on and sharing that particular piece, which is why Beth volunteered and was voted to be that official representative attending those meetings. So, no.
Sorry. The mic. Tom.
Maybe it is. I could be wrong, I guess.
I'm Beth Epps. I haven't been to all of the meetings. I came fairly routinely for a while. I haven't been in a couple of months, I think. But certainly if we want to set up a process where at every meeting you guys want to give me information to take back, I will do that. The minutes of our meetings are online, and if you would like me to bring copies of those or present those in any way, I would be more than happy to do that. So however you all want to proceed, I'm very happy to do that.
Go ahead.
So Beth, as the public person now, who is on the BHUAC? What areas are represented? Can you tell us? It's a lot.
Wow, I don't know that I'm going to be able to tell you completely. Tasha, can you take that one, please?
Can we hold that question for the mental health subcommittee meeting? I had probably hit on all parts. I mean, we have several different people there. Christina Nieves is here, who's a representative from the commissioner's office. Jan is from Disability Rights Oregon. We have members from Beth is from Cascadia. We have Central City Concern. We have a couple of different family members. We have 3 different peers. We have NAMI. Mental Health Association of Oregon, VOA. We had a public defender who recently resigned from the committee, and we're in the process of finding a replacement for him.
911?
Oh, yeah. We have a representative from Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and BOAC, our 911. Oregon Health Authority. I don't have the list in front of me. It's a pretty large and diverse group of representatives. All their names, and I'll say this here, all of their names are online, and I have repeatedly encouraged, and I think everyone in the room who will hear me say this has heard this numerous times, it is our committee members' responsibility to be a conduit for the community to our advisory committee, both in bringing information from the organizations and our communities they're a part of, not just to bring that information to help us make decisions, but to take information back. So I've really, that's something that we're, working on, and also just as a part of trying to talk about what we do, putting our minutes and agendas and the recommendations and all the response to those recommendations, they're all online. You can read all of them, so.
So I was just going to say, I really appreciate that, Beth. We did vote you to be the person to be at this, and I appreciate that you're doing that. I'm wondering if, aside from the minutes, the agenda, I don't know how these meetings interface, but if you get the minutes after we've already had our meeting, you're not really having a whole lot of input into our meeting, besides knowing what we happen to have talked about. So I'm just wondering if there's some way to time it so that it's actually meaningful information as opposed to, oh, that's what they're doing.
Well, hold on. We've got one comment here. Yeah, and then.
I apologize for not introducing myself earlier when I spoke. Reverend Luke Walters, and I'm here representing protection and advocacy for individuals with mental illness. We do advise Disability Rights of Oregon. Thank you, Jan, for being here with us, and Tasha, Mary Claire, Anne. it feels like it's growing again, reestablishing what we're here for. Thank you, everyone. At one point, I did apply to join the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Council a year and a half ago, and you and I have spoken about some very inspiring ideas that could help us in this process, very, very much. What I've found that's worked in the past in my representing the statewide coalitions of peers with mental illness and addiction histories is that some individuals will be present on multiple committees and councils, and that's the easy way. If there is not a connection, then some individuals that know each other that are on those councils can speak to each other when they are in the know about the interest that intersects. But that takes for some coordination and some staying on the same page together. And I would like for our idea of some like meta council to form with representatives of many, many demographics and interest areas and organizations and efforts, but I don't know how to go forward with that yet. So I think that those of us that are interested in the process and maintaining the health of the process need to recognize when one of those links falls away. One of those persons that's supposed to keep that communication flowing is not able to do it anymore. And we need to be able to check in with that person, ask if we need to replace or something like that, because this is really, really important. And I am very interested in staying present with the process, and we need to be working with the people that are very interested in showing up. Yep. Thank you so much for everyone doing so.
Yeah, Tasha, did you have?
Yeah,
Tom's next.
Just briefly, I was going to say that I tried to get the agenda on the schedule about a week, or on the internet about a week ahead of time. I will admit that I am very, very busy, so occasionally that does not happen exactly a week at a time, but I do try.
Tom.
Just 3 points, I think, regarding your meetings. I have taken issue with the city attorney's advice that you do not have to meet publicly, as did Disability Rights Oregon. The city attorney told us probably 6 months or 9 months ago now that they were going to give us some legal opinion as to why the COAB and its subcommittees are required to meet publicly, and the BHUAC is not. And I just want to reiterate, as a legal matter, I think that the city attorney's wrong on that issue. Secondly, I want to remind everyone that the COAB approved at its last meeting a recommendation that all police-related reform advice, recommendation bodies, whatever you want to call them, meet in public because of transparency. And Keith's not here, and I would say it if he was here. No one is going to articulate Keith's position, whether you agree with it or not, like he will. I'm not capable of doing that. I don't think other people should take on that responsibility, and he's not alone. I mean, we hear from countless people at COAB meetings with professed issues with mental illness. And if you're not listening to those people directly, I just think you're losing valuable input. And that doesn't mean that the work you're doing isn't top-notch, and I'm not in a position to comment one way or the other because it's not something I've really looked at. I will assume that you're doing good work. I think people think that's true. But it could be better, I would assume, if you heard from people who were living with that experience. Again, just using Keith as an example because he spoke tonight and talked about his mental illness. And I just think it's a mistake in transparency. I think it also, unfortunately, with the city's blessing, continues to sort of put up this barrier to full and complete transparency. And I can say personally, I think the city talks a good game about wanting to hear from people, but it doesn't necessarily really care about what we have to say. And I think that when an important committee like the BHUAC meets in private, that's really a disservice to the work you're doing. I think it's a disservice to the city, and I really would urge you, with or without a legal opinion, to reconsider that and list the people directly, allow them to attend meetings.
Oh, yeah. So I see 3 people with hands up. Let's start over here.
This is only coming from my experience as an advocate. We are the new civil rights movement. We're not organized in Oregon very well yet. I think Reverend Luke is shaking his head and some others shake. And so we don't yet have a good way to communicate to everybody. We have one listserv that those of us who are out being advocates try to share. It's not easy to get on a listserv, and we could use the help from the community to help us create this voice so we can talk to each other. We just don't have it. A lot of us don't have a lot of money, so we're on a shoestring, we're volunteering, we're barely making it in life just to live off of SSI or SSDI. I mean, it's a struggle sometimes to get food each month. So that's where I just want to give that context. And I just want to also offer an idea is that maybe some of the BHUAC meetings can be open, maybe a quarter or so, and some not. I don't know how to make sure that the work gets done in an effective manner. And also as an advocate, it's hard because aren't those lines of communication enough out there. And we also need, I would say, as mental health advocates, we need support so we can get mentorships going and new people and young voices in these, even here in places. But it's hard because and I've been through this, how many years? It's hard to be treated as somebody who's less than. And so to ask somebody to continue to speak and the attitude or the comments coming back to you is that you're less than, it's very difficult. So I just want to keep this in mind. We need more support in how to get our voices out there, feel confident, feel supported, and go on.
Yeah, Tasha.
So I just want to say I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to respond to any of the legal part of that. But the BHUAC has discussed this twice now about its own desire, and it was left up to the BHUAC. The city attorney did not tell them they could not. It was a decision made by the committee. So it's not the Portland Police Bureau forcing a decision. That committee has a lot of autonomy to make its own decisions. And as far as, now this is me personally talking, as far as hearing from the public, I believe that, but I also believe that there's a lot of people with a lot of different experiences. And there needs to be a forum for that. I would adamantly say that's not the BHUAC because of their function. Do they need to have peer representation, people with lived experiences, families? Yes. But those people aren't going to be, we can't possibly hear from every one person. And I think that's why I've had conversations with several different groups about how peers organize and how people can share their own experiences and find a voice that's never going to be singular because everybody's going to want something different, and that's always the challenge is people are going to want and have different viewpoints. So I think that it's important. I think that that's the first, at least from my perspective, and something I've certainly been working on is trying to figure out a way for the peer community to come together and have that voice, and then be able to send that back to the numerous committees, and not just the ones for the Portland Police Bureau. I sit on at least 2 different cities or committees for Multnomah County mental health. So all of these committees that are out there need to hear from the peer community. And although you won't get one voice, there needs to be a place for those peers to come to express themselves. So I do think that's important. I just think it has to be the right spot.
Yeah, V.
Testing. So I just want to do a quick check-in. How's this process working for anybody? Does anybody want to add a different perspective, or or some critical feedback? How is this meeting process working for you all? Are there any issues that need to be addressed? I just want to check in that the process is working for everybody.
I just had a question. I'm wondering if all of us understand what the different committees are and exactly what they've been tasked with. I mean, and everyone may. I'm just wondering if maybe routinely that needs to be revisited for if there are new people at the meetings.
Oh, okay, so I'm going to leave that to the chair. I'll be more specific about my question. I just want to make sure that right now in this meeting, is everybody feeling like their voice is being heard? Are there any issues that anybody wants to bring up that we can resolve immediately? If there's no problem, then we'll move on. Just raise your hand. So he is the taskmaster.
Yeah, I think Reverend Luke had.
This is perhaps the last comment on the previous topic, and it would be good to finish it before moving on, I think.
I wasn't trying to move on. I
Okay.
was just trying to win.
Yeah, inviting feedback could happen, could result in a whole lot of raised hands, though.
Okay, that's good. That's good input.
I wanted to mention to you folks that we had a very successful public forum as PAMI and the BHU. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago at Bud Clark Commons. And I have been interested in having another one. It's been difficult to arrange that, but recently I've been very interested in pressing forward with it, and that's partly why I got in touch with you again, Tasha. But in specific, I have been thinking lately that it would be best if it was a COAB BHU PAMI public forum. It was very successful, and perhaps, you know, the BHU advisory committee could meet mostly private to take care of business, and then, you know, forums once in a while. Could be great to hear from the public. Some options. That was successful, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have something, Mary?
To answer your question, V, that's Mary Yang, I really love the circle, and I feel like I'm a learner about facial expressions, and I feel like we all have a measure of social anxiety in this new experience, but I love looking at you and learning from even Calay's bright pink cheers me up, and I'm sitting Indian style. That makes me more comfortable. And I think, can you even say that? Oh my gosh, Native American, good God. I want to say also that I've lost my point. And I wanted to say, if there is anything I have ever said at any meeting ever you've ever seen me at that made you feel uncomfortable or that I need to apologize for, I want to reach out to everyone on every side of the aisle and just say, I'm willing to talk and I want to offer you my apology. If I've ever hurt your feelings or made some kind of value judgment that seemed to put you in a off kilter, and I just want to put that out there and just say I'm open-minded to adapting and learning.
Okay, Rochelle.
No, we're the microphone. Yeah, use this microphone. I just wanted to say something some more, Tasha, about the closed behavioral health unit committee. I'm hearing that, you know, the committee likes it that way, and I'm hearing that it has some value. But in recent days, one of the things that the community has gotten most upset about is closed meetings. The closed meeting between the city and the PPA about the contract. The closed meeting about accountability, which still is not settled. And now we're talking about a third closed meeting. I understand that sometimes things work better when it's closed. I can appreciate that. But you're losing the trust of the community when you close meetings. And there is no way you can make that up. One of the things the COAB is supposed to do is be a conduit between the community and the government in rebuilding trust with the Portland Police Association, the Portland Police Bureau, sorry. And I just want to say that as long as there's any closed meetings, that is just not going to happen. So, even though sometimes things are more efficient or you can really get things done because there's not some distraction or derailment or whatever, I'd appreciate if you would rethink that. Thank you.
So when I first saw the settlement agreement and that there was going to be a COAB, I thought, that's great. What a wonderful addition to a process. And I sort of viewed it as being a group of people who would have some input into most all aspects of the settlement agreement, which is, of course, a huge task, but a very important task because we find, certainly at Disability Rights Oregon, we're client-oriented, and you really can't get anything done for a client if you don't understand where they're at, what it is they want, what their goals are, what the problems are, what their concerns are. So I think I saw this group as being something that could help effectuate that in the whole agreement. It is true that, our agency submitted a memo on open meetings laws to all the different BHU members. People looked at it. City attorney showed up, gave her opinion, which, as I recall, was sort of, this is not really by law required, kind of it's up to you guys. And then there was a vote that was taken. So, and I was in the minority. I can't remember how much in the minority, but I think a fair amount in the minority. But I agree that and it does seem like we're an efficient group in a lot of ways, and we have good discussion and whatnot. But efficiency, was that really the goal of this settlement agreement? I think a huge piece was the us and them. How do we bridge that gap? How do we all live together in a way that's more comfortable for us? And so it just strikes me still as an obvious that we should have some better input. It just seems very clear. We could say we're doing good work, but good work for who? Are we all happy that we got something down that seems like it's meaningful, and maybe the police feel like they can implement it, but is it helping broadly or not? I'm not saying that we're not getting anything done. I think we are, but I think we are missing the point, and that we could are missing a part of the point, which was a big part of the point. And I don't have like a to Z on how it would get done, but it seems like something needs to be put together that's a little bit more effective than what we have happening now. It's always like gnawed at me, like, but wait a minute, why aren't we getting more input? What's happening, and why is that COAB group? I don't honestly know why all of, what's all happened with the COAB too, but it's dismaying, because I think you have a huge role in the whole process.
Yeah, I'd like to say something, if you wouldn't mind. Two things. First, I'd like to ask a follow-up question to Tom about this letter in the packet. You sent a letter to the mayor. It's the second page in here. Have you gotten a response to this letter?
Well, the letter is undated, and it's labeled as a draft.
Just the first. Yeah, it's on the first. It's just right on the back of the very first page.
Yeah, Philip, it was simply a draft of a letter that I thought the COAB should consider sending. And as it explains, in part, it was prompted by the response, a commendable response by the chief and the Bureau to recommendations from the Training Advisory Council about 90 days ago, or 90 days from the time that they responded. And I know there's an argument to be made that there's a different line of authority or a different line of response that's in place, whereby the chief and the Bureau is to respond to the Training Advisory Council. On the other hand, the COAB, besides making recommendations, is charged with giving advice to the chief and the city. And I think our recommendations constitute such advice. So I think that it is remarkable, understandable probably given the history of the city's response to police reform efforts in the city, that they have never responded, not once, to a single recommendation that the COAB's made in the last almost a year and a half now. And not only is it frustrating, I think it's not furthering police reform. So I drafted this letter to formally raise the issue. Although we've raised it in other contexts before, it just seemed like in light of the response to the Training Advisory Council's recommendations that I just learned of, that it made sense to raise the issue. I don't understand why we don't get responses. We just don't hear anything. And some of the recommendations I don't even think are controversial. They could just do them, and I can't imagine the Department of Justice that would object to them. But they just sit there, and that is not, in my mind, furthering the police reform that the community wants and that the settlement agreement contemplates. So that was the reason I drafted the letter. And I would move that we vote on and adopt the letter and send it.
Okay, so who would like to make a motion?
You just did.
Second. I'll second. All in favor of Tom's motion?
I think we need discussion before we vote.
I'm sorry, I'm just excited. I got excited, and I'm very warm, so, yes, let's get to some discussion.
Well, maybe this is unfair, but we have a DOJ person sitting in the room.
It's totally unfair.
I wondered, Jared, if you would like to comment about the process for our recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I know this is come up.
Microphone.
It's next to, or is it?
Hello, I'm Jared. I know this has come up before, and the process that I've been instructed by the fellow DOJ lawyers who are more involved in this case than I am is that we are responding to COAB recommendations. I believe that we responded to the recommendations on 8/50/20, and we did so after that policy was approved. And we will respond to the COAB's individual recommendations as they pertain to 1010, the use of force policy, but that is awaiting finalization with the city. We have a timeline for that I think Mary Claire can speak to. Jonah said you could. And so when that is, the policy is finished between DOJ and the city, then we will respond to the COAB recommendations and our views on those and how they, just as we did with 8/50/20. And I wasn't involved with that, so I apologize, but I believe Adrian authored a letter that went to the COAB and to the city that discussed our view on those recommendations that dealt with the mental health policy.
Thank you. Ms. V.
Jared, I just have a quick question for Jared. So is 45 days enough time for that process? Because like Tasha was saying, it goes through this, I think it was Tasha. Probably wrong. But, go ahead, Tom.
Well, a couple of things. Jared, the response by the DOJ to the one directive was not sent to the COAB. We received a copy of it, but it was not sent to the COAB. And this letter is directed to the city because training, for example, through the BHUAC or training through the Training Advisory Council is no different than training that the COAB may be addressing. It's training for the Police Bureau. And when the recommendations are acted on by the city with apparently no input by the DOJ from these other committees, it just doesn't make sense to me that our recommendations on training or other matters aren't acted on or responded to by the city to us, so we know what's going on. And that's the reason this letter was not directed to the DOJ. I understand what the DOJ has told us. The DOJ has said they're going through this process and they're slow and they're bureaucratic and it's going to take a long time, and it has. But that doesn't, in my mind, excuse the city from addressing the recommendations, and that's the point of the letter.
Oh, did you want to respond?
I was just going to say that I can't speak to that point.
We need the microphone. Yep. Because they're taping, recording it.
Just to say, I can't really speak to that point of what Tom's mentioning. I understand the distinction. I can only speak for the Department of Justice, and even that, my authority is extremely circumscribed. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So I just have a quick, are there members of the CUAB who are watching this on live stream that aren't here tonight that are also participating that might be voting? That was a big question I had.
Okay, is Rochelle more discussion?
One of the things that hasn't happened for the COAB that was supposed to happen is we're supposed to meet, and I can't say exactly when, with the mayor and with the chief of police so many times a year, and pardon? Two. Well, it's been 0 so far, and we're almost at 2 years. So maybe we should invite the mayor and the chief of police to our meeting next month and talk to them about the content of this letter. See, I'm sort of fearful that we can send all the letters we want. I don't know, they could go in some wastebasket. But if we invite them and have a roundtable discussion about the issues, let's hear what they have to say.
Yeah, and it's not just inviting them, it's sending a letter too, and as well as inviting them. I think we could do both. Do you have a comment?
I think it would be appropriate to invite the mayor-elect as well, just to listen in. Mayor Wheeler, he's coming in very soon, and we really have no clue what relationship we'll have, and just it would be a nice invitation, I think.
Okay, do we want to wrap up discussion? Yes, Marie Claire?
Yeah, I want to clarify something for for those of you who might not have been through the process from the get-go. Your recommendations, as we understand them, are for the policies that the Bureau is implementing, Tom. And So those recommendations, I understand the frustration. The Bureau has been frustrated because the policy development piece of this process has been slow. It took us 11 months to get 850-20 finalized and accepted and enacted, okay? So the recommendations that you have made are sitting, waiting for us to address these policies. We have a system in place where the DOJ and the COCL and the Bureau meet to discuss these directives. And that's what happened with the mental health one. I can assure you, and the letter attests to it, that the recommendations that the COAB made regarding the mental health directive were all considered, and many were incorporated. And then the DOJ sent that to the COAB. The same is true. We are now on the force policy, which you had a number of recommendations on. And last month when was it? Just a few weeks ago, we met with DOJ for 2.5 days working on the force policy. And every one of COAB's recommendations were on a list that we looked at as we went through the development of the new policy directive for the Bureau. And every one of them was considered, and a number of them are going to be incorporated. I can assure you of that. It just hasn't been finalized yet. This is a process where the Bureau posts a directive, then it is put up for universal review. So we spend 30 days awaiting public comment. Then it comes down from that, and then we have a reconciliation process. We develop a version. It goes to the COCL and DOJ. They send us back their red line version. It goes back and forth until we come to some resolution. And now each month we have face-to-face meetings to go over these policies line by line. It is a tedious process, but it is a process that takes into account all of your recommendations. And I understand you have many others hanging out there, but we haven't gotten to all the policies that you have made recommendations on. As they come up, the next one will be, DOJ has identified that they want to do the 300 series, the accountability series. So once we finish the force, we will take on the Bureau's accountability group of policies. And all of the recommendations you made about those will be also considered at that time. But we are not going to comment in advance of the development of the directive as to what your recommendations are, because this is a back and forth process with the COCL and the Bureau and the DOJ. So that's the system we have in place. As I said, I understand that it's frustrating that it moves so slowly, but that's the way it works, and your things are not lost on us. They are being considered at every meeting.
Okay, Marie Claire, I don't think you're hearing us, though. What Tom is trying to say is that when recommendations are sent, we don't get an email that informs us that we did receive your recommendations on these specific directives and we're working on them. Informed communication, that's not happening.
Okay.
There's nothing happening. So I don't know if the papers that have been collected are just sitting there and there's a stack of them, or if they're sitting on the DOJ's desk or where they're at, but somebody needs to let us know what's happening so the community, we can inform them and say, yes, they're working on it. And there's some feeling of hope with that. But right now it's continual frustration of just, yes, we're working on it. Do you know what I mean? That's where we're at now.
Sure. And I will tell you that at the outset of this, when you guys decided that you wanted to tackle policies, and I believe Mr. Geisler addressed this, the agreement on all of the parties was that you would take your recommendations for policies, and they would go to the COCL. The COCL would then send them to DOJ, and then DOJ took the responsibility for once the policy had been enacted and we would, came to a final, version, that they would send you back the finalized version with a explanation of which recommendations had been, enacted or incorporated, and if they weren't, what the reason was that the COAB's recommendations were not included. So that's the process, protocol that we had set up at the outset. The reason, as I said, if you want more updates, I'm sure that we could keep you apprised, but the reason you haven't heard anything is because no other directive has happened except 850. There was one other directive that's been enacted, but COAB didn't have any recommendation on it, and that was 416. But then we did 850-20 and the 2122 series. The mental health ones were done, and now we're doing force. So we really haven't gotten many done of all the ones that you have addressed.
Okay, Dan?
Okay, well, first, again, Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. First of all, that was just said isn't true because 1,500 training was also done, which training, it was, a finished copy of that was circulated to Portland Cop Watch. I've seen it, so I don't know.
COAB didn't have recommendations on that one.
I thought you did. Do you remember, Tom Steenson?
My recollection is we did.
My recollection is you did also. But regardless, the point is that whoever came up with that system needs to rethink that system right now, because you're hearing that this is what the choke point is, and what led to the implosion of this group, more or less, is that when they make recommendations that came from discussions from the community, and you're sitting there and saying, well, we have to talk about it with the DOJ, the Bureau has opinions about these things, and we know that. And we know if you say, well, that's not going to work because an officer safety issue or whatever, then send it back to the COAB, and then they have a chance to work on it some more so that when it gets to the finalization, instead of them being left out of the discussion, they're part of that discussion all the way through until the end. Right? You understand? There has to be a continuous feedback loop so they can be part of it all the way to the end, because otherwise their recommendations are just whatever they said, boom, thank you very much for making those recommendations 25 months ago. They've got to be part of it all the way to the end. And the agreement is among the parties of the city and the DOJ, and the COAB is there to advise you both. So I don't see why the COAB shouldn't have a person, and yes, the COCL is currently the chair of these meetings, but I don't see why the COAB shouldn't have a person at those meetings. I think that would be a very good way to build community trust and create that feedback loop.
Sorry, Marie Claire, did you want to respond? Okay, very well. V?
Shaking your head that wouldn't work to have a COAB member.
No, what I was shaking my head was because if you want to take up another suggestion, from my perspective, it would be more helpful if you would address these directives as we are, rather than doing them months or years ahead. And we can give you the schedule of the ones that we're doing, but you talk.
Wait, I'm
what?
sorry.
Go ahead.
You put out those directives for review and ask for input.
No, I'm talking about now when we have this DOJ schedule. We're dealing with the force one right now, and so that's when we're going to take up your recommendations about the force one. Is all I meant. You were talking about contemporaneous, so.
Okay, V wanted to say something.
So, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, my sense is that the main issue is about communication. And clearly it sounds like the PPB, the DOJ, and the city have a policy development process. And that the community wants, Okay. Is that better? Sorry about that, you guys. Sometimes it's like, well, if I can hear myself and everybody else can, right? Okay, so I'm going to repeat what I said, so for the sake of everybody else listening at home. So what I heard, the central issue is about communication. So the PPB and Mary Claire, I'm not trying to single you out. So I'll get the corner over there. So the issue is about communicating about policy development, and that the community wants to see, wants to be more a part of that process is through the communication that, I mean, we started out this conversation with that letter that's in the packet. I'm not going to hold it up because we're all familiar with it already. I think it's a little bit deeper than that, though, from what I've heard so far from what people have said. And I don't really want to belabor the point, but certainly there's bright minds at the PBB and the city and the DOJ that could figure out some sort of communication process that includes the COAB and the community. So that way, at least the community is aware that these policies are in the process of being developed or analyzed, like that. I'm not a policy analyst professional yet, and I know that there are other people that are. So hopefully somebody in our community, in our circle right now, can speak up to that. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you. One of my concerns was hearing that passing any directive potentially takes, you said, 11 months. This is a 5-year shelf life, and we're already through 2 years. So if every single directive we're passing is going to be at least a year, I just worry about, how are you going to get anything done in that process? And is there any I've worked for government agencies, and we've done a lot where you streamline things and can cut the time in half and stuff, because basically if it's not a legal requirement to do things that way, usually there's some flexibility. But I just don't understand how it could possibly take that long. But that does seem like that would be problematic.
Yeah, and I will tell you that because of the length of that one, we have fixed the process. We have set monthly meetings. All the parties commit to, several days a month to do this. We in the Bureau have made a more robust policy team so that it used to be just one person in the Bureau that was, the point person for these, and we have expanded that group. And so I think that we're all committed, and I'm sure Jared will attest to this, to move this policy process much quicker in the future.
Yeah.
It seems to me what I heard is that the process is that the COAB makes a recommendation, and then the city and the Department of Justice and the police department all talk about it between themselves and totally ignore the COAB. And at the end of it, they do whatever they're going to feel like doing without even talking to the COAB about what they spent a year and a half working on their recommendations. Now, why is that?
Well, but I guess I got to ask you why you just said that you think that we ignored you. I just told you that every recommendation that this committee made was gone through line by line when we looked at the mental health one, and then 2 weeks ago when we did the force one, we had a list of all the recommendations, and the Department of Justice and the City Attorney's Office made sure that every one of those was talked about, addressed, and acted upon.
Because the COAB
Tom, did you have something?
The COAB went back and forth for a year and a half talking about those things, and then they sent the recommendations to you. And then whatever it is you wanted to do with them, you never even told them. You ignored them, and if there's red line versions, how come the red line versions don't come back to the people that made the recommendations? That's what I don't understand.
I just want to jump in for a second, because something you said kind of set me off the wrong way a little bit, as far as we didn't hear anything. And as a city employee, I have sat in these meetings for almost 2 years now and participated in many of these conversations. I'm not the only Portland police officer that's participating in it. So to feel like the city or the city of Portland hasn't been committed to that process kind of diminishes the value, at least my value, my own personal value of the time that I spend here at this meeting actually trying to participate. So I just want to put that out there, that all these discussions about all these policies has been done, and really some of it, in my opinion, could have been more robustly. So the recommendations, when they go back to the committee or go back to the DOJ, should feel like this is what we want, and if it's either, either the DOJ, the COCL, and the city say, yes, this is good, or no, and why not, it's kind of, it'll come up again. Like that policy will come up again. So there's those 2 points, at some point you have to make the decision, put the policy out. This committee is having an input, but it has a chance to have an input twice, an informed input, because we all sit here to have those conversations as advisors. So I'm just putting that out there.
Their advisors.
Yeah, Tom, did you?
Well, the point that Dan and Mike both made is, to paraphrase it or restate it, we represent the community, and we worked very hard at the community in putting together recommendations, largely in isolation without support or resources, and frankly, largely without much input from the police bureau. Mostly, we've heard no comments except some negative comments on our recommendations. For the most part, it's been neutral. We never got support. We just got either silence or, positions adverse to our recommendations. But the point is, why are we not at the table during these discussions about the policies that are going to affect the community? It doesn't mean that we control what gets decided at the table, but why aren't we there? And if you want the community to trust in these changes in the directives or whatever policies or whatever's at stake, it would make sense to me to have us involved at that critical stage, because after the DOJ approves it, the city's going to have no interest in revisiting the issue because they've gotten the blessing of the DOJ. And we need to be there now. And frankly, it's only been since the hearing when there was some mention by Jonas about the DOJ actually doing some work on the force directives that we had any idea that any work was being even done on that. But if work is now being done, we should be there. One, we have input, and two, to get the buy-in, to at least get some understanding, some commitment from the community that this is okay, and it's not just the DOJ and the police bureau making a decision behind closed doors. It would be helpful to have us involved.
Okay. First, I just want to say something. It seems like we've had a lot of discussion, and I think we've got a little bit of heated in this discussion, and I want to get back to the point of the letter, and I would like to know if we want to agree collectively to send it, or if we should have one person send it on. So I want to know about what the consensus is on sending the letter. For myself, personally, as a COAV member, I support the letter. So, but I'm curious, other opinions. B.
Testing. Hi, Charles. I support the letter. I'm going to say, though, that I hear a deeper issue that I think is even more critical, and that's just about communication. I don't think that the PPB doesn't want to communicate. I think that maybe the way communication is being framed is differently, is being perceived differently from different people. I also feel that the community wants to be involved, and I could be wrong, and that's okay, wants to be involved at the table with DOJ, the PPB, and the city while they're hashing through the policy development. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because the COAB does so much already, but I'm willing to be uncertain and unclear in my position about that right now. And then the last thing, before I let this go to whoever wants to talk, is that I think it would be maybe helpful, and this is my suggestion, to, for the COAB on its website to clearly delineate the policy development process for the COAB and how that happens between the police, between the PPB. And likewise, for the PPB to clearly communicate that on their website, and maybe they even want to have a link through, is that what that's called when it's all highlighted? And then you would go to the COAB website. So that way things like systems are working together. Because that's, I mean, in the end, that's what we are. We're a community of one. So that's it.
Rochelle?
I'm fine with the letter. And in addition, I think we need to invite the chief and the mayor and the mayor-elect. But I also wanted to comment about what you said, Tasha, about feeling diminished. I think that's the whole crux of what we're talking about tonight. Mm-hmm. We talk about it with different content, but it's the same issue about trust and communication and feeling diminished. The community feels diminished because we aren't at the BHU meeting, we aren't at the policy meeting, we aren't at the PPA contract meeting, we aren't at the accountability meeting, we aren't any place except here by ourselves. And then we invite you, but we aren't invited anywhere. And there is no communication to us. Amy Ruiz gave us instruction all along. This is the time for this policy, the universal directives. And we diligently worked on that. And we talked about it. We had communication. We wrote up the policies. Kathleen didn't want them written one way. We wrote them another way. We had police advisor input, et cetera, et cetera. We sent them off. And then we don't know. I mean, you tell us there's a procedure that they go to the COCO, they go to the DOJ, they eventually get to the city and the police. But we don't know that that's happening because nobody talks to us. And I don't know how many more times we have to communicate, and I don't mean to just be focusing at you, Tasha, or you, Mary Claire, but you happen to be the representatives, and Jared. And, you know, I'm sorry I just have to talk to a few of you. And maybe the people who are listening could be hearing this too. But somebody needs to be communicating with the community. Thank you. Thank you.
Dee?
Okay, so I think there's a motion on the table. After that motion is done, I want to make a motion about status reports. So.
I think that's out of order. We have not yet voted on the motion, so yeah, let's get that done, and then we can move to a second motion. Yes, definitely. So are we satisfied with the discussion that has happened thus far? Okay.
Although I'm not a board member, I've been showing up to these meetings for a long time. Reverend Luke, once again, if I may provide this observation humbly, it seems like by how the compensation has been figured, you know, the COAB's doing a lot of the work, but I've heard some figure of $150,000 going to the COCL, and COAB really hasn't received anything. And then also it was indicated that the chain of communication is from COAB to COCL to DOJ back to Portland Police, you know, City of Portland. So I'm just going to suggest maybe the COCL was kept in the loop but didn't communicate to the COAB, and that's why COAB in the community doesn't feel part of it. It's just a suggestion of maybe a loose thread that could be rethought, re-envisioned. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan?
Before you vote on the motion, I heard what sounded like a friendly amendment that the letter should also go to Mayor-elect Wheeler. He does go into office on January 1st. So I think that would be a good thing if we wanted to add that as an amendment. I don't know. It was Tom's letter, right?
Yeah. Tom, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I would actually suggest 3 friendly amendments. based upon what people have said, that we send the letter as is. We invite. Sorry. We send the letter as is. We ask and invite the mayor and the chief and the mayor-elect and those other people in the settlement agreement who are supposed to be meeting with us to our next meeting. And that we also ask for written updates and timelines as to what review is being given to our recommendations. And thirdly, we ask that we be included at the table in the discussions relating to policy changes and so forth that are involved with our recommendations.
Yeah, V.
Tom, oh wow, got that. Boy. Tom, I just want to make sure, did you have a status report in there too, or in all of those amendments? I got dizzy with your amendments, Tom.
They just should keep us updated as to the timeline for what is involved in putting these recommendations together, which ones they're looking at, when they anticipate that they'll be looked at, et cetera.
Okay, does that seem reasonable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Happy, I believe I suggested that months ago. So
I wouldn't be surprised. Can I second that motion?
Yeah, great.
Unless Kat,
Friendly
did you want
amendments
to?
have been agreed upon, which means that we'll go back to the main proposal that's on the floor. All in favor of the motion?
Oh, that was all. I got it. Okay. Thank you, Amy Ruiz.
Thank you. Okay, back to V. Did you have another motion?
Well, first, Charles Bridge Gate, Bridge Stone, Bridge Crane Johnson.
Good evening, Charles Bridge Crane. Okay, Johnson. And I think that even though we'll send the letter as is, I hope it will be posted on the cococoab.org website for us to refer to, and that citizens will feel encouraged to also robustly communicate and point out that at the beginning, the Department of Justice said that the police oversight system in Portland is Byzantine. I haven't really seen any objective assessment of whether it's getting less Byzantine or more Byzantine. And in the process that's happened in the past year or more about changing police oversight or accountability, it became maybe both Byzantine and Machiavellian. Secretly drafted by the mayor was one single CRC member, James Young, a former prosecuting attorney, who, without interfacing with the rest of the CRC or any of the COAB, worked with the auditor, who's not very happy with some people who testify in front of Judge Simon, to streamline, change, improve, whatever, the police system. And it might be constructive for the community or for the COAB to ask for the DOJ to express an assessment of if there's any improvement, reduction in Byzantine type behavior on this part of the city or such, because I think it'd be very hard to find a person in Portland, especially when you consider how the public hearings went,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
that, when they had the hearings about changing police oversight accountability, CRC, it was pretty much unanimous public hearings that said, this is bad, it reduces public engagement, it reduces accountability to citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, V.
I'm ready for a break. Is that okay? Can we have a break and come back in
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
15 minutes. Come back at 7:50. 7:50. To the meeting. Before we really get rolling again, we're supposed to be done at 8:30. I would like to share a thought before I pass it off to V, and I know V would really like to take the floor. But there's 3 things very quickly I want to bring up. The people in this room who have experience with trauma from police and abuse, from that trauma comes PTSD, and we respond differently than your average person. And I'm asking the PPB to please remember, keep that in the back of your mind when you're talking to a person who may have experienced trauma before. It doesn't mean that they're trying to be defensive or trying to attack, but it's how they're expressing themselves. And I think we need to remember that it's not always very formal, but it's a lot of give and take, and it's a lot of work to meet on different levels. That's just one thought that I wanted to put on the table. And tonight, everyone who has come here, I mean, this is a great meeting. This circle, it feels so much more open, relaxed, conversational. When I left during the break, I saw people engaged in talking with each other, and that's what I'm talking about. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing and open to have these discussions. And please, when you go home, spread the word with the community that this is different, things have changed, and come to the meetings, okay? I'm going to pass it back to V now.
Okay. Again, I just want to say a big, huge gratitude to the community members that are new here and the ones that continue to come. It means a lot to the people that can't come. And a big thank you to Mary Claire Buckley and Lieutenant Tasha Hager for coming tonight. We appreciate you guys showing up and participating. It makes a huge difference, and I'm glad that you all came. I really appreciate it. And then to, I guess it would be the COAB staff. Number 4 agenda is restoration program, but it's really restorative practices response team. And so that would be great if that could be changed before thank you, Cody. You are awesome. So I don't know how many of you have this packet, but I just want to talk really quick about community engagement and policy development. On the last page, there's a diagram of the blowfish, right, representation. This came out of New Mexico. I forgot where, but that's okay. We'll put it up. Oh, and look, the COAB team has it up here too on the screen. Maybe the live stream could catch that. I don't know. One of the things that I'm hoping the community can do is think about what sort of information they would like to bring to the COAB or what sort of policy developments they'd like to see with the PPB or any part of the settlement agreement in terms of a systems-wide approach. And jot it down on this little page, and we're going to be having this. I don't know if I'll still be on COAB in February, but my hope is that that's okay if I won't be. But my hope is that the next iteration of COAB will be able to use this as a format to and for people to conceptualize with other people in other systems within Portland, whether that's institutions or organizations or nonprofits, in a way that gets people talking it's a lot it's a lot like what we were talking about earlier about the COAB wanting to be able to have some sort of presence or communication line open with the BHUAC or the PPB PD, which is Policy Development. I'm becoming the acronym queen. I'd like this to be part of a work group that happens in the accountability subcommittee, where you write down whatever it is you want to see happen, and just study this diagram and see where what you'd like to see happen fits. Write it down there, and then come to the accountability subcommittee and get to working with, hopefully, me in that policy analysis or policy development. And we'll try to see how we can fit that into our work as the COAB and the settlement agreement. Any questions? Awesome.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, are you ready? Oh no, it's more sports metaphors, huh? We do that. Why are we doing that? It doesn't have to be us against them. No one has to, we can all be winners, right? The soccer team. I just want to bring up another context thing that I was waiting to have a time to do it, but we were talking earlier about us and them, but there's a lot of us's and there's a lot of them's. So I just want to give that thought just as a person with mental health issues who has been in and out of the systems. I can only speak for myself. There's a lot of them's. And it's not just the police, it's the doctors, it's the family, it's the neighbors with stigma, it's my own friends. There's just a lot of them's around. Hopefully we can all become us, but I'd like to keep that context in mind. And with that eloquent letter that Jenny Resberg wrote, and also Jason Renault, it was in some kind of packet before we have so many papers. Basically, too, those of us who have been involved for a long time with mental health advocacy feels like the COAB is a them, that it's not an us. And partially that kind of came up, came up the way it was structured. And I came to several meetings. I kept saying, well, mental health. Well, I thought this thing was mainly about mental health. And if you look at the number of recommendations, somebody made a number of things, and maybe I'm wrong in my memory, but something about 4 recommendations really had to do mainly with mental health, and how many, 30 or 40, had to do with other things. Now, I know there's all kinds of theories and thinking about that, but again, it feels like a them, and I hope that in the future things will be shifting, that we can all feel like we're an us. So, okay, I know Dan.
Mary, you would like to go through one?
Oh, can I say one more us and them? One more us and them, sorry. So I go to City Hall sometimes on different things like that, and I keep hearing from City Hall, mental health has nothing to do with us. You know, that's the county. But if 1/4 of all people in this nation will have a mental health crisis sometime in their lifetime, it's a lot of people. And I think that is a city issue and challenge, and they can help with solutions. They have this COAB, they have the police, they have even the customer service that they're doing. So that's what I heard actually from one commissioner, is like, well, what does mental health have to do with City Hall? It doesn't. So that's what we're working from at this point. I believe, I'll just say a opinion, because I'm apparently a policy opinion shaper because I have a TV show. I like that. And I think our new administration mayor-elect will come in, and it will be different. I really have this feeling it'll be different. For those of us with mental health issues, we at the county worked with him, Mayor-elect Ted Wheeler, on a lot of mental health issues. I felt listened to. For example, I gave testimony and went over the buzzer, the beep that they have at the county, and he said, no, I still want to listen. Please continue. So I think we have some hope.
Dan?
Again, Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I have a few things. I just wanted to come back to things from earlier in the meeting. One, somebody was asking about the Byzantine oversight system. There was a council vote scheduled September 14 to vote on the second proposal that came forward from the city that was going to that proposes to cut out public input. We have a theme here at CRC appeal hearings, among other things. A stakeholder group has been called together by the city, and they subcontracted with John Campbell, who worked on a stakeholder committee, a similar one in 2010. That stakeholder group meets Monday. I wish Regina was here. She was remind me. Oh, it's at the Commonwealth Building from noon to 3, and it's an open to the public meeting. It's open to the public to discuss how to change the CRC. Okay, I'm just going to keep hammering on that point. So that's, I think the community at large should know that, and you all should know that, and I hope that COAB members can come. It's during the day, which is problematic in itself, but that's another issue. With regard to the BHU Advisory Committee, a couple of easy things that can be done immediately without opening your meetings up completely is you can have an email list that says, we have just posted our minutes from the last meeting. If you're interested, this is the link. Because I'm not going to go to your website every month and see if the minutes got approved or not to go look at it and download it. So it's helpful to know when those things happen. In terms of opening up the meetings, you can have parts of the meeting that, if you have to discuss certain clients or whatever, you can call an executive session. There's actually public meetings law that allows that. You can say, well, now we're going to discuss somebody's personal health issues, so we can't have it in public. We're going to executive session. Or you can say, we have to deal with client A or client B. That's what they do at the Citizen Review Committee meetings. They call it Officer A and Officer B. Hey, protects their privacy, and we can have a public meeting. That's pretty cool. It's a good idea. Let's work on that. Some of the things that I know haven't necessarily been discussed at the BHU Advisory Council Committee because broader swath of community hasn't been there. I assume they haven't been discussed there, are the awards that were given to the officer that killed Michael Johnson last year, which is very upsetting to many people in the community and shouldn't have happened again after Jose Mejia's officers got medals. And if we're in this context of let's reduce use of force against people in mental health crisis. And I had a discussion with somebody in the community about the term suicide by cop, which the OIR group in their January report, when they looked at the shootings and deaths, said you should stop using that term because it implies that if you want to die, that if you approach a police officer, that's a good way to do it. It's just not a term that should be used anymore. And that's a discussion that should be happening at that committee, and I don't think that has ever happened. So these are the kinds of things you could have broader discussions on. And the last thing I want to say about the BHU Advisory Council Committee is all the recommendations that are coming out of the mental health subcommittee here could have been done in conjunction with the BHU. They could have worked together, and they could have built stronger recommendations. And if there's anything that isn't perfect in what got recommended, I think Tom said it best before, the city's not going to go on and want to revisit it. Okay, it should be that there's some. And I understand you have a member who's been going to meetings. I've never heard her speak at the broad meetings, and I don't think she's necessarily spoke at those subcommittee meetings, but I don't go to them. But you need to have communication so that everybody has input into those recommendations so that they're correct. Get it right the first time. Let's not keep going back and around and back and back and back. Okay, so one other thing, wow. I can't read my handwriting. I'm going to have to hand it back to somebody else until I can read my handwriting.
V.
Oh, sorry. Okay. You need a bigger room.
That's all I'm saying is you need a bigger room if you're inviting the whole community to come sit in a circle.
Yes, sir.
You want to set it here?
V, and then it'll come back to you, Nancy.
Do you mind if I just?
You go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so on the agenda tonight, I wanted to bring up this diagram here to kind of help people to help people to start thinking about what roles they want to play and what information they want to bring to the COAB or whatever circles they work in. But please try and come back and let us know what we can do to effectuate the kind of change that you want to see happen. I've been in conversation with Philip and Anne, and a little bit with Luke too. One of the things that we've been concerned about with past COAB meetings are some of the ways that some people have been harmed, and it's been hurtful for the community to different degrees for different reasons. Certainly there's been primary and then secondary, and in some cases vicarious trauma. And I think that as a board, I'd like us to raise our consciousness level about that and to be more caring for one another. Restorative practices, one of the underlying grids is a social discipline window. How we do things with one another is critical, and the reasons why we do things with one another is also critical. So the restorative practices response team that I'd like to be involved with involves peers. It involves professionals that know about what's necessary at what time. And with that added component of a restorative practitioner who says, let's take the moment right now and address those harms, whatever they might be, so that people in the meeting don't continue to be effectively victimized, harmed. Certainly going forward, again, I'll touch back. If I'm included on the COAB in 2017, I'm really going to want to see that change, just as a matter of my personal health. But it's, you know, when I'm in community, it's hard for me to see other people being hurt. And sometimes people don't express that, and sometimes people do. But moving forward, I would like to figure out some sort of policy that's agreed upon by as many people as possible, and that sort of protects our space as community members working together, you know? So I've already started some of that work and have spoken with, man, these things are heavy. And I've spoken with Philip and Ann and a little bit with Luke, but I want to suss that out. I want to get more explicit with that. But I want to let people know that that's happening, and that the COAB is a space, in my mind, principally, that is a safe place for people, no matter what system they represent, that they can come and share their perspective, their experiences, and their feelings forthrightly, and they'll be respected. And that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but if we continue to show up and take the time to be explicit about what that means, then I think we honor each other in community. So I just wanted to let you all know that. Are there any questions?
Nancy had a comment. Did you want to say something? Okay.
Mine is not a question, but it is to add to this idea, because I am very excited that you're interested in this and you've been developing this. I have also been paralleling you, as well as many other figures in the community. And it's exciting to me that we can work with the behavioral health unit and other teams that are forming, but this is like ahead of its time still. But what I envision is a crisis response team, restorative practices, specialists, trauma-informed care. Originally it was like community policing, working with police, and then I started to morph. It was like more like nursing, kind of a combination of all of this. But the fact of the matter is there's some pilot projects that are on a small scale right now being offered by Washington County and Multnomah County, but they're not peer driven. We need this team to be from the the peer community. It's kind of tricky when we're talking about funding sources. So if we can assemble these coalitions that are gathering, forming, reforming, and get the funding, Mental Health Association of Oregon is one of these particular coalitions that could help with this. And they do have the funding from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And their focus is vocational programs. So I would like to illuminate that intersection and point out the needs so that we can bring all of this together. Peer-led, of course. It's nice that the governments and the cities, they're having these teams work with the BHU and stuff like that, but it's not peer-led, so it'd be nice to have just more available. Thank you.
And then I don't know if I can get this to work. I think it works. Did you want to respond to that first? Oh, you sure? It does relate to what you're talking about, and your comment about the city, and then it's the county's responsibility. Well, here's the interesting part. The big problem with our city council as a whole does not look at what they create with their policies and their voting on making people homeless, because they keep spending money and they don't address the issues of how they circulate the money through the community. That is a big part of it. If people are forced out of their homes, right there, you have a mental health issue on many levels. Look at our education system. We can't keep up with the cost of education or the technologies and the stress that's involved in that. We're a stress-ridden society. And the council does not acknowledge and should have some kind of, and not just leave it to the police, have some kind of conversation about a quality community. And they don't. They really don't. And so they position themselves as policymakers without acknowledging the stress of what our whole system is. And until you get to that, it would help a lot more with everything else. There are a lot of wonderful people in here in this city that do great work, absolutely great work. But I think it would help a lot more adding to that.
Yeah, Mary, did you have something?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary. I had 2 points, and the first one was surrounding the term Byzantine. I would prefer to use labyrinthine, and I don't know if rococo or, excessively bureaucratic or what the proper word is, but I had to look up Byzantine Empire because it was just really bothering me, and I was like, is this a slur or is this a compliment? Does it mean highly ornate? What does it mean? And I think we all
complicated.
Thank you. Yeah, but to me, it still means other things. And I feel like with our language, okay, I'm moving on to my next point. That's it. Neurodiversity. And I'm loving what you're saying about the mental perspective. Where is it? And I think it's a diverse group of people, but neurodiversity was the word that really grabbed me. And a lot of the stigma that people face with understanding their own minds, if it is embraced as a difference that is, sometimes you maybe have great musical abilities or you have excellent researching skills, Mr. Handelman, or whatever kind of mind creates that. We all have tremendous gifts for the world, and sometimes they cause us problems. And so I think if we start to look at mental illness as neurodiversity, it picks my mood up, and I start to think, why don't we learn to value each other, each and every one of us? And I think I wanted to go back to the us and them thing, and I was feeling how we have so many us's and thems. And Mary Claire Buckley and I connected one night, and I will never forget it. It was mind-blowing. And I think I had read 1 or 2 articles and accepted the propaganda as the whole truth and the only truth, and then I found out she was like a fabulous person, and then I felt really silly. And I think being willing to set aside your preconceptions is about my biggest agenda with everyone. We all have preconceptions, and if we can set them aside and start with a clean slate and a fresh mind, I'm learning that I can be an unforgiving person, and that's something I need to work on. And thank you. That's all.
Yeah, Charles. Andy.
Thank you. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. And I think that we're departing a little bit from the agenda, but touching on something that maybe the COAB members and the community will want to discuss some more, in that, you know, the settlement agreement, even though that's your task, your focus, your function is to just do oversight of the settlement agreement and community engagement related to that, it quite possibly left lethal holes in a holistic system of community care. So I think that that also is something that the COAB should look to formally comment on. There are, you know, obviously we have a fractured system where we try and say, oh, well, the county plays with these marbles and the state plays with these marbles and the city plays with these marbles, and you're in the wrong marble room for, you know, what you want to fix. So I went to the other marble room this morning, and there is, even though Mike Reese is in the room, there's good things to report. The county is adamant, well, it's not totally good. The county is adamant about having more empty beds that it won't let homeless people sleep in. Those beds will be in Jail Dorm 4 and Jail Dorm 5. Actually, Jail Dorm 4 is already shut down. But there doesn't seem to be any formal or constructive process to talk about how we change. I'm sure that Tasha Hager probably knows a little bit, because there's that other room of marbles for BHU people. But that, you know, if there's going to be less incarceration, do there need to be changes in policing? You know, can it just be fixed with the matrix releasing and the release and recognizance program, or do we need to improve the discretionary tools that police officers have in the field? So even though we're focused on the best implementation of the settlement agreement, I think that since the CRC gets tasked with all these special little functions that COAB is excluded from, like the fancy meeting they had a couple weeks ago, where they talk about policy and not just do individual IPR appeals, I think that there needs to be a place for discussion about if that is too fractured. We have the COAB, we have the CRC, we have the PRB, we have the OIR, and that's just in the city.
So I hope this answers that. So what I hear you saying, Charles, is a systems analysis of what different organizations and how, you know, an assessment, an evaluative assessment of how systems are faring, monitoring and evaluating different systems. I'm not going to name them because there's way too many. But I would say that a restorative urban village movement, like Detroit has a restorative urban community, and that's with the Skillman Foundation and Larry McClendon and the International Institute of Restorative Practices have created and are still working on a system that uses restorative practices to assess and proactively, as in just in time, monitoring and evaluating how systems are or are not, and to what degree, working or not working, and to what degree with one another. Okay, and then, so that's one thing. And then another thing that I've been thinking about, and other community members, have talked about with me, is the need for a Portland civil rights office. And I'm not sure where that conversation needs to happen. I'm thinking it needs to happen in the accountability subcommittee with an associated work group. So look to that in the future.
Yeah, Dan? And then,
Okay, just wanted to add one more thing. I did not want to let this go before the end of this meeting. In terms of the review of the directives, the Portland Police Bureau, for a year and a half, put out a list of directives, 6 or 7 directives every month, and asked the community to respond in 30 days. That is partly the schedule the COAB was following because those things were coming out, and that's what we followed at Cop Watch. And COAB got a lot more leeway to put their recommendations in later, even though, again, we're being told they put them in too early. But they got a lot more leeway to finish up their recommendations than the rest of the community. We're volunteers too at Cop Watch. And they're volunteers. The COAB are volunteers, and they're putting all this time into these things, and these paid people are going to these secret rooms, and we don't hear anything back. And every once in a while, we found a typo, and the typo gets fixed in the directive. But that's not very gratifying. The Bureau also did redo the racial profiling directive last year because of the state law, and they did not incorporate the recommendations from the COAB. So there's quite a number of recommendations that have been done, but no feedback's come back to this group. And the Bureau attends all these meetings that that they have made these recommendations. They could easily have been brought back in on it. And just to re-emphasize the point, if we come up with something, or the COAB comes up with something, and the Bureau doesn't like it, it's much more helpful to hear, we don't like this, and this is why. Let's work together on finding a way to implement. What did you mean by that? So maybe we can get to what you meant by it, but they can't do that if they're not at the table.
yeah.
I just have a word of gratitude. And first I'll say, Dan, thank you for all your work. How many letters and things when I come to COAB? I mean, it's just amazing. Without you, the T's would not be crossed, or they'd be crossed the wrong way. So, Dan, thank you for that work. And I just wanted to say, we're having a discussion today about changing systems. And V, you did it tonight. So thank you so much. You tried something, and Philip too. So we tried something. Is it better? I don't know, we'll have to maybe vote on it. But from my viewpoint, as someone with mental health issues who thought the COAB was not handling mental health, I'm really comfortable being here. And I just want to say thank you to you.
Yay. Okay. I'd like to add to the comment that was just said. Because the structure of COAB is in a state of change, we haven't officially been separated from the city. I want to take this opportunity now until the change officially occurs in that interim period that we can come together again, make sure that we're on the same page before we move forward. And that's the reason why we wanted to try this different approach tonight. So thank you for being open-minded to this new idea. And it's amazing. Okay, so I did notice, Charles, did you have your hand up? I
think it's been covered. There was a little bit of follow-up for what
okay.
was in.
V?
So now just closing the circle, any last thoughts? Oh, gosh. Sorry about that. So now to end the process, we just close it out. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Thank you, everybody, for participating, bringing your hearts and minds and souls.
These chairs are awful hard.
Okay.
I do appreciate, well, whatever. That's fine. Well, I appreciate the new format. I'm a person that likes to see things get done, and I'm glad that you got to vote on your proposal that was on the table. Just, there's a good way to combine getting things done and voting on things and having these discussions. I think that you should work on making sure that both can happen. Yeah, no more. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I would like to thank Mandy. I really would like to thank you, and I want to emphasize that. Last week, I was under a lot of pressure. I was thinking about the community coming here to this meeting. I was thinking about, should we cancel the meeting? I was having a lot of thoughts, and then last minute, I realized that this is the community's home, and it should be open no matter how many people come. So I decided to have it and conduct the meeting, and Mandy was willing to do a lot of hard work to get everything set up, the technology, everything set up, so thank you so much, Mandy, and thank you to the community for coming. Nancy? Do you want to comment? We're going around the circle to say last closing comments. Nancy, did you have something?
I just can't believe this group is so incredibly amazing to work with.
Okay.
I think people
Great.
want to leave.
Please ask Philip if he is going to take it on.